So we're going to do two assignments that will really help you develop your line control and getting that nice even hand so that you're going to be able to dictate exactly where you want your pencil to go. The first assignment is taking a variety of different media here. We've got some fine liners, we've got 2H, HB, 6B, and then whatever pencil of your choice. And we are going to create very systematically, we're going to create 4 columns. Very specifically, we're going to have a certain specific size of margin on the top and on the bottom. Those will be equal. The spacing of the columns will be laid out centered on the page, and the column widths will be equal, and the spaces in between will be equal to the columns as well. And we're going to do this all freehand. The other assignment that's going to give you excellent line control is connecting the dots using, again, a variety of tools and using all kinds of different lines as well. And we'll end up with an image that looks like this. The format that you're going to use is going to be 1/8 of a sheet of the larger sheet that you actually were given. So here's a 1/4 size, and it will be folded and torn in two. And this is the size that we're going to work with. And from this, on this sheet of paper, what I want to do is to draw those 4 columns nice and evenly spaced. So here's how we do it. I'm going to start off with my handy dandy tracing paper, because tracing paper, it allows you to do it ever you want without any fear of making a mistake, because it's not in good yet. So I'm going to trace out the outline, and this is just for practice that I'm doing this. Just trace out the outline of your format of that 1/8 of the size of a sheet, like so. All right, so let's just put this aside because this is a good sheet of paper and we want to do our very best on it. But here's our practice sheet. I'm going to take this sheet and eventually create those 4 columns, but in a very specific size and a very specific layout on this page. And I said that we're going to have a bottom margin and a top margin, and those columns will be centered within that format. So let's find the center. Very simply, take one corner and draw to the next corner, and by virtue of these diagonals, and even in this you're practicing your line control as well, and they might be a bit wonky, no problems, just erase and start again. But now I have the center of my page. So just drawing very lightly. These are just construction lines, and you don't want them to be too dark because they'll end up in your finished drawing. So you decide on how big your margin is going to be, but let's kind of eyeball it, basically about an inch and a quarter, and that's going to be my top margin. Now you don't have to eyeball it down here, because what happens is I can draw that line, and again we're going to practice our line control, and I'm going to draw a vertical line parallel to that line right there. So from here, draw that vertical line towards you, and where it hits those diagonals, what I can do is just draw another guideline. These are very light lines, these guidelines. Just draw a guideline, and that's where it hits on that diagonal will create a space between the top and bottom of the pages, which are equal. So that's a nice little trick. And I'm going to draw again, this is now going to be the bottom extent of those columns. So the columns will fall here, and this is where they will start. Okay, so now the idea of this is that once we have basically our top and bottom margins in here, and we have the center of our page, what we want to learn how to do is space out those columns so that they are evenly spaced. So give yourself a measure. So for me, what I'm going to do is take this distance of my thumb and eyeball it so it looks like it's center from the knuckle there to the tip of my thumb. All right, that's my designated measure now. And very lightly draw yourself a line. And because we want 4 columns, there'll be 2 columns on one side of the center line and the other 2 on the other side, obviously. So that's how we're going to end up with our columns. 1 column, 2 column, 3 column, and 4 column. So I've got my measure. There's my center. There was my thumb right there. And I'm going to take that same measure, and that measure will form the measurement for the rest of my columns. So right here, between here and here, is my next column, but very lightly draw that down. And now I'm representing the space between those columns. So tip of the thumb to the knuckle, and this becomes my other column right here. So I'm going to darken these lines here. Nice firm control of my hand, no different than practicing from before, but you're going to get much more practice. And I'll darken that one, otherwise the margin and the space between these columns gets kind of confusing. So I'm just going to darken this up. And you can see I'm using one pencil for all of this. Just makes it easier. I'm not really switching out pencils at all. And I know how to control that pencil. I know how to make it very thin and very light, and I can make it very dark as well. Okay, so this is the start of my next column. So if you're confident enough, you can just draw a nice dark line to begin with. And all of these lines should be parallel. The thickness of the columns should be as thick as the space in between. So again, there's my spacing right there, the tip of my thumb to the knuckle. And I'm going to draw that dark because I've got pretty good control of that, and draw that dark and that dark. And if you don't have good control quite yet, because you will develop it, there's my next one here, do go lightly first. Just go light first. Give yourself, and if you kind of floof it up and you don't get it right, well then just draw another line over it until you're satisfied with the line that you're actually going to use. And then I got to remember though, it wasn't actually on that tip, it's right there. So I'm going to extend that line. And there's the other edge of my column right there. And I'll darken that up. So now I have 4 columns, and these columns are now going to form the field in which to practice the various line exercises.